This is the Level Up Engineering Podcast, where we talk with some of the most successful engineering leaders who reveal actionable management insights that help you take your developer team to the next level. This episode is brought to you by Coding Sans, a software development agency building web applications from design to delivery with React, Node.js, and Angular. Check them out at codingsans.com.
Welcome, everyone. I am Carolina Toth, host of the Level Up Engineering Podcast, and it is my pleasure to welcome another accomplished tech leader here with us today. My guest is Maura Kelly. She has been at Mailchimp for over 7 years, and she is the VP of Engineering there, so she has a pretty big job. And before we start with today's topic, I want to ask her about her life, what she does. I know she has a computer science background and she is in Atlanta. I don't know if she wanted to give that away, but I am quite jealous. So please tell us about yourself, what your passions are, and what we should know about you.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Carolina. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited about this. So as you said, I'm a VP of engineering at Mailchimp. I have been here for about 7 years. I lead teams that are primarily working on the product side of development. So my teams are working with our cross-functional partners like design and marketing and product to deliver products to our users. So I do have a computer science background. I majored in computer science in college. I have worked as a manager for a bunch of years. Before that, I was an engineer, back-end engineer. My favorite language is Python. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, with my husband and my dog and my 5-year-old daughter. And all of that and playing Wordle kind of takes up all my time. But when I do have spare time, I love to read. I'm an avid runner. A little fun fact about me is, so I've been doing German on Duolingo like on and off for years. But one of my big goals for this year is to make a more deliberate effort to actually learn German.
Awesome. German is kind of hard. I'm also on Duolingo now, studying Italian for fun.
Cool.
Thank you for sharing that. And without further ado, our topic today is iterative development. And you talked to me about some things that you have been doing in the recent past. So what is your new development process? And please, if you could share the story with us, where you are right now with Mailchimp.
Yeah, absolutely. So, on the topic of iterative development, one of the things that I worked on last year was we put on what we called the customer obsessed sprint for our whole product development team. So like most everyone kind of runs their own version of Agile. We run in 2-week sprints. And over the summer, we did a sprint to focus only on kind of bugs and lingering customer issues, and took a pause from new development. It was a really fun event. It had as I mentioned, it was the whole product development team. So it was product was involved, design was involved, and we really just rallied around the customer experience. So obviously, we are always working on things for our customers. So whether it be new development or fixing bugs, but I find that teams can often get can get sort of tunnel vision on just building their new features, which are also important. But this was a nice time to take a pause and look at the things that were plaguing our customers.
That's really awesome. And if you don't mind me asking, was it coming from your engineers to take this pause, or was it coming from management?
So the cool thing about this this particular event was it was sort of coming from everywhere. One of the little, I love sayings, and one of the little sayings I learned in this whole thing was that great ideas have many parents. So there had been kind of pockets of different folks starting to think about something in this area, and we kind of all came together and started working on it together. So it came from engineers, it came from management, it actually came understandably from our support team. So I had a couple particular co-conspirators I wanted to shout out. Mehdi, Lee, Cal, and Ariana all really helped me with this. But again, the very cool thing about this, like I said, is it was sort of coming from everywhere and it coalesced together.
I love that. So how does it look like? What is the new development process, and what does it involve?
Yeah, so this was one of the interesting things about this particular event, and I think really kind of also translates into all day-to-day development, is we have hundreds of engineers. So we have a number of product teams, and what that exactly looked like differed for each product team. So what we tried to do was give teams some input. So we had a list of, kind of ranked high-profile customer bugs. We had, we could even rank it by how old they were. There were some things that had been reported by customers years ago that had still not been fixed. But then the teams also knew from the product areas that they owned what things needed to be fixed there as well. So how that looked differed for each team, where they, kind of brought together, like I said, the kind of the input of these old bugs and then what they knew from listening to their customers and knowing their product, what they needed to fix.
Mm-hmm. So did all these teams come together and they worked in like a multifaceted manner, or did they work in different stages of this development?
So that's a good question. For this in particular, we time boxed it to a sprint. So we time boxed it to 2 weeks, and that really drove a lot of I think good decision making, where when you're time boxed, you have to get stuff you can do in 2 weeks, right? Basically, right? Like, what could I make a difference on in 2 weeks? So I would say that the teams kind of jumped on it quickly, and we're trying not to spend a lot of time deciding what to do or taking on something they couldn't do in 2 weeks, and we're trying to get something out quickly.
Mm-hmm. That's really awesome. I love that when there is a time pressure, sometimes really good ideas come very quickly to people.
Right.
Okay.
Another saying I love is creativity loves constraints.
Oh, yeah. I love that too. I might just steal that. That is very true. Very true. Okay, so you are in this new development kind of sprint, and people need to make decisions very fast. I imagine Mailchimp is a pretty big organization. What did this look like from the leadership's point of view? Were managers perhaps taken aback, or were they prepared? What should someone who is thinking about a change like this feel out for?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things you have to consider when you're making some sort of change or wanting to put on some sort of event is buy-in, right? Leadership is a lot about sales, a lot about getting people on board with your ideas and selling your ideas. So definitely I was thinking a lot about what leadership might want out of this, what they might want to hear to want to do it, to get excited about it. So there was a kind of a couple things that I grounded it in. One was that we had rolled out a new set of core leadership behaviors that we felt like were the things that we needed to do to best serve our customers. And one of them is customer obsessed. So this was a clear clear point where I could be like, hey, we can do this sprint, and it shows that we're customer obsessed, will actually make tangible benefits for the customer. So that was one thing to think about with getting leadership on board. Another thing to think about was the impact to our customers. So we typically, so our customers' busy season is Q4. Holidays, and it's where folks make most of the revenue. So from a development team perspective, we typically are pretty calm in that part of the year. We don't want to be causing outages for our customers. We kind of like to chill then, and we do a lot of bug fixes then. But that's also the busiest time for our customers, so wouldn't it have been nice for them to get those bug fixes earlier in the year, going into that period of time. So these are just some of the things that we were thinking about, and how could we get everyone on board with this and really excited about it. So I put together a proposal for it. Like I said, I had a lot of co-conspirators. We worked together on the pitch and getting everyone to really understand what we wanted to do. So I would say that the things to think about is like, what does leadership care about? What do they want to hear? What are the impacts that you're going to have out of making this change? And kind of put that together in a way that you can to talk to them about easily. So like I did many kind of informal chats with people. I did a specific presentation to our executive leadership team about this event.
I love that. So, Thank you. It sounds like you made it really tangible for the people in the leadership, and you kind of made it appetizing so that everybody wanted to participate. And yeah, that's really great. And you also mentioned that this was coming from many different angles of the organization. But how did you get that buy-in from the developers? You mentioned that sometimes, and as we all know, sometimes developers get into the development-oriented development rather than the customer-oriented development. What were your key selling points there?
So a couple things. One is, I find that engineers really do want to do work that's really impactful. And so I think an important part is showing people how impactful it could be. Our customer team uses Zendesk. And so we just have many, many, many tickets in Zendesk, like many customer reporting issues. In the customer obsessed sprint, we were able to resolve tickets that touched about 1,300 Zendesk tickets, that's impact, right? We had dashboards where you could see how we were doing on closing issues. I think the other thing to think about with getting developers on board is, we all know that, we've got stuff out there we would like to do better. If you wrote code 6 months ago and you don't want it, you probably want it to be better. So kind of tapping into that natural, I know I can do this better this time.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And just to go full circle, did you send out any kind of memo to your customers? Was there some kind of a big drum up to the event, or you just kind of did it and then rolled out with the improvements?
So we were kind of quiet about it. We didn't roll it out. We didn't talk about it to the customers. We do sometimes follow up on particular issues, right? Like if a customer reported an issue and we fix it, we'll report back to them, but not a big sort of customer fanfare.
All right. So it was more for the organization and for the product.
Right.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So you mentioned that there were some tickets that were there for an outstanding period of time. Did you ever have an event like this before, or what was your process before this happened?
Yeah, it's a good question. And one of the things I wanted to mention is that if you want to do this, it was a really great event for us. I think the teams really loved doing it, but that doesn't mean you can just forget about bugs besides these 2 weeks. So how that typically works for us is, as I mentioned, the end of the year is pretty pretty quiet period internally to make sure that the platform is stable for our customers. So we will do bugs during that time. And teams will also work in issues, outstanding issues, customer bugs, et cetera, during their normal sprints, during their normal development time.
All right. Okay, so I'm trying to get my head wrapped around this. So this was like a 2-week sprint that you organized for the entire organization. What did it have a name kind of, or was there some kind of a gamification to it in some sense?
Yeah, so the name, we called it the Customer Obsessed Sprint. And customer obsessed is one of our core leadership values. So that's where we borrowed the name from. And we did have a dashboard where in Looker where you could see all of the issues that have been tagged as customer obsessed sprint, and then see how many were resolved and see how many were open and how old they were as well.
And how many, did everyone participate, or was there like some kind of a sign-up sheet, or just the whole company? What? How could you get in the customer obsessed sprint?
Right, great question. So we had all of our development teams participate. So it wasn't the whole company in the sense that not all of our functions are working directly on the product and things that work for our customers, but we had everyone who was directly building software for the customers participate.
Wow, that's awesome. Tell me about the people that you mentioned. You gave a shout out to some co-creators of the idea. How did this come to life? What were some of the most memorable kind of events that you can recall?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the folks that I shouted out had similar ideas and were actually working on their own pitches. So Cal and Ariana are on our customer team, and they had worked on a pitch similar, where the development teams would focus on knocking out as many customer bugs as possible. Mehdi and Lee are on our engineering team and our QA team, and they had kind of looked at, well, our larger development teams are divided into these smaller product teams that we call domains, and they had looked at like, oh, just in my domain, could we do some sort of event where we could knock out a whole bunch of bugs, or maybe a whole bunch of technical debt. So it was cool, like being like, oh, I had this idea, and then other people had really similar ideas and start to work together and figure out those common patterns. And then you have, like a little fun cohort. I had thought about it from the sense of kind of like you take a hackathon and flip it on its head. So where a hackathon is just like go out and work on, whatever interests you, which is also valuable. But what if we kind of flip that on its head and said, hey, like for this 2 weeks, let's really, really focus on bugs.
Right. I love that. And maybe it's a really great way to motivate everybody who is involved, so that they can all be, like really engaged. Like it's a little project within the whole team.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. We got really great feedback. People seem to really enjoy it. People have been asking about doing it again, so that's always good.
That's awesome. Are you planning to do it again? It kind of sounds like this could be something that you organize, every year, or maybe more often.
Yeah, I mean, I think every year would be great. Potentially, you could do it twice a year. No concrete plans at the moment, but definitely thinking about it.
That's pretty awesome. So what was? Let's go down to the nitty-gritty of the entire event. You mentioned already that you put together a little infomercial for the leadership team, and you kind of tied it to the new company values. And you also said that you kind of got the developers on board by highlighting how their work was making an impact on the entirety of the product. Who were kind of the decision makers? Who had to give it the green light? What were the steps of implementing the whole thing?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And actually, that's a really great larger question. I bet a lot of people find in their organizations, sometimes it's really hard to know who's the decision maker, or
sure.
Where do I get like the final okay? And sometimes you just have to go for it. Sometimes you have to ask forgiveness and not permission. So this was actually a really great example of that, and a good learning opportunity. So I am part of a group that we call CDT. It's the Customer Delivery Team, and what this group does is we're cross-functional leaders across the disciplines. Just really looking at the overall, like how we're delivering on our product for our customers, and how our teams are doing. So that group was kind of my first stop to get their buy-in after I knew a lot of folks were really interested in it, because we're really thinking about those teams that would be involved in this day to day. And then, as I mentioned, I also did a presentation for the executive leadership team on this event. But this is a great one where it's hard, right? This is one of the hard organizational challenges, is figuring out, like who's the final decision maker and how do I get this thing done? And so what I would encourage folks to do is just kind of like, just get started, start talking to people, start figuring out who you need buy-in from, and just keep building from there.
That's really awesome. And also show the people who might be hesitant how their participation might be really great for them or their teams.
Right.
Is there anything specific that you can share for the VPs of engineering who are listening, that you particularly had to do, or something that you're quite proud of within organizing this event?
Yeah, so a couple things. One is just really think about your cross-functional partners. So as I mentioned, I'm already in a team for that. So this group, we meet together every Tuesday. So I kind of had a natural place to go for that, but maybe other VPs of engineering don't. But the big thing would be to think about your cross-functional partners. Because one of the things I really believe is, early on there were some questions like, is this an engineering only event? And I said, no, I really think this is about what we can do for our customers. And, I bet that for every, technical debt thing or bug that an engineer would like to fix, I bet there's designers going, well, I don't really like this interface. I bet I can make that better, So engage your cross-functional partners and really make it about the whole team, about the customer, about something that's a little bit bigger than just engineering.
I love that. And so you went to your cross-functional partners. I love that you have a weekly meeting. I think that's something that we can already take away, that cross-functional heads or team leads or VPs should have some kind of a check-in. I know that it's kind of like a cliche these days, but I still see some silos. So I think you can't iterate that too many times. You have to tell people that they should talk to each other. So you got the buy-in from your cross-functional colleagues, and you got the buy-in from your teams and leadership. And so I kind of heard between the lines of what you were saying that you really didn't need a kind of final okay, or you didn't wait for a final okay. You kind of just did it. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, we had a lot of buy-in, a lot of support. There's sort of phrase that I've coined. One of the women on my team is really, really good at this. It's and so I coined this when we were talking about it. It's like minimum viable buy-in. Like, at what point are you like, you have enough, so just go do it, right? One of the hardest things about this whole event was picking the date. And for that, we worked really closely with project management because I feel like project management just knows they know everything having to do with time and calendars and what our rhythms are. But yeah, just kind of like at some point you just gotta jump. You might not get like a final like yes, 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 of course you can do this. Go forth. You gotta jump.
Right. So can you tell us what the date was, or is that confidential? I don't know if I am.
Oh, it's
if I
not
should ask that.
confidential. It was the week after. It was the 2 weeks after 4th of July last year. So I could look at a calendar, but I wanted to.
No, I think that's already cool.
Yeah,
because it sounds
maybe
like
the 11th.
it sounds like people already had like some fun resting time. If it's, close to the 4th of July and they were coming back and full of energy and enthusiasm, hopefully.
Yes. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So as a company, we had, as a company, we had taken that week off of the 4th of July. So we came back and did it right after that, which is just also a really nice way to come back to work.
That's awesome. Yeah, for sure. You already kind of hinted on this about the feedback from the developers and the people who participated. Would you care to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah.
Like, what was the feedback from the developers or from management? How did it all go down?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, good feedback generally. It definitely also got some constructive feedback, which I'll share as well. But people enjoyed it. People enjoyed, it felt kind of freeing, to have a little bit of space and deciding on what you want to work on. There were a couple like really old bugs that were fixed, and that was really exciting. Some of the kind of constructive criticism that we got to think about for next time is one was like, and I definitely thought about this a lot, was we could have been more directive. We could have been more directive in what we wanted the teams to do. We left it somewhat open-ended, and that would be something that I would definitely think about for next time. We also pulled it off really quickly, based on when we started talking about it and the kind of that 2 weeks that I talked about that worked out really well for the sprint. The time in between there wasn't super long. So more comms, always good advice, right? So next time, if we do it again, we'll do more comms and more comms further out. But that was another piece of constructive criticism about it. But I was in a meeting just last week when people were asking about like, oh, people really like that. Could we do that again?
That's awesome. I love that. And I wanted to talk about this because you said you haven't made any plans about like when exactly you are going to do it again, but has it brought any kind of structural change in a way? Like, do you take tickets differently, or do you approach certain kinds of problems differently since this happened?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that I have any like quantitative answers to that at the moment. But I would like to think that qualitatively, it's always good to raise the customer problem in the minds of your teams. So I felt like there was some value in having it and talking about that, just period, right? Like talking about the customer experience, the empathy that you can gain, not only from seeing how the customer is using the product, but seeing how our customer team is responding to our customers using the product. So, I feel like, qualitatively, definitely changed some thinking. It definitely changed my thinking.
I love that. And now that we have talked about this and we are telling everyone that this is a great event and you should all do it and you should all be customer focused, let's talk about if you had any challenges. Was there something that you can, particularly recall because it was a very hard time, or something that you would definitely do differently next time?
Yeah. couple of thoughts on that. One, I've mentioned this already, but I like sometimes one of the things I struggle with as a leader is the sales aspect, which we've talked about already, because sales can feel to people like, oh, I need to go, get someone to do something they don't want to do, or they kind of think about it in the most negative way. But if you think about where, like, it's not, I think sometimes this is a very engineering thing too. Like, you just have this brilliant idea, and obviously people will understand it immediately and just come along with you. But that's not usually reality. You can have a brilliant idea or a thing that you're trying to do, and you're probably going to have to sell people on it a little bit. So that was one of the challenges, and I think also really a challenge for me personally. Another challenge was something I've mentioned already a little bit, was just about teams having the direction that they needed to really make the most of those 2 weeks. So if we did it again, we would be more directive, have more comms, make people feel more confident and comfortable with the time. And then the last challenge I would say, and again, I've talked about this a little bit too, is, a lot of times it's hard in organizations because you don't, like, permission isn't this binary thing. Sometimes you have to jump and you have to make that leap, and you have to have, you have to feel like you're confident in the buy-in that you've gotten and just go forward.
I love that. On that note, can you tell us what the point was for you to know how did you say, the minimum viable buy-in?
Yes, viable buy-in.
So what did it feel like when you had it?
Yes, absolutely. So I remember this specifically. I was meeting with our product leadership team about it, and in that meeting, folks were sort of like, okay, like, who says we can do this? And I was like, we do.
I love that.
And that felt like a really good moment where it was like, all right, we were kind of like over the cliff here.
I love that. And that means you personally had enough confidence in all the people who you have talked to say, okay, guys and gals, we are for this idea, all of us collectively.
Right.
I love that. This is really great advice. So we talked about the process. We talked about some of the challenges. We talked about the future of the project, I imagine. I am hoping that you will have a set date sometime soon for when it's going to happen next. Are there any potential pitfalls or some things that you would like to warn us about if we are thinking about this inside sales aspect of something like this?
Yeah. So a couple thoughts on that. One of the things that I think you have to do is both stick to a vision and be flexible. So if you're trying to do really anything, right, you're gonna get some feedback along the way. People are gonna be like, oh, do this, oh, do it this way. What if we did it for only 1 week? What if we did it a different time? Bunch of, kind of little feedback along the way. And you both have to be flexible to that feedback, but also kind of stick to your core vision, right? Like if you want to feel strongly kind of inside that there's a thing that you're going for, and stick to it. Because I think people really see that, right? Like if that you have a vision, and you're working to accomplish it. I think the other thing is something that I mentioned earlier. This sprint is not a substitute for doing work within your normal development cycle on bugs and technical debt and UX debt even. But it was a great moment in time to just focus on those things.
Mm-hmm. This is really great. I think there are many good things to take away from this. And so if you can tell us a little more about how the end looked like? Was it, a hybrid working environment? Was it everyone being fully remote? How did it actually go down? What did it look like?
Yes, that's a really great question as well, because of pandemic times. So this was entirely remote. We did it all, over Slack, Zoom, and Mailchimp has been working remotely for the past 2 years. I've been here in my house working at home for the past 2 years. So one of the sort of additional challenges I think when you're putting on an event remotely is drawing people together and kind of like drumming up excitement. So that added a kind of another aspect to this. We've done events pre-pandemic, did a ton of events in person, a ton of things where we would actually fly in all of the folks who work remotely into the office and do things all together. But this one was entirely remote. So couple things that helped. One was things that people could look at asynchronously. So like I mentioned, the dashboard. And the other thing that we did was, this wasn't immediately at the end, but a little bit later, we do a company all hands on a regular basis, and we in that company all hands highlighted all the things that we accomplished during the sprint. So, but just in conclusion, it was all remote, and definitely a little bit different pulling off an event when it's all remote.
Right. So can you tell us a bit more about how the different teams interacted? Was there a specific kind of work strategy behind the event, or did you just go on as usual but worked on this special dashboard?
Right. So one of the things that we chose to do, and pretty deliberately chose to do for this particular event, was to not change teams, was for already established teams to do this work. I am very interested in the idea of like, what if we, kind of let folks choose their own teams and like get together with folks who are interested in working on similar problems, because I think that there's a lot of value in that. But for this particular event, when we planned it and how much lead time we had on it, we decided to just do teams in place. So they could already, kind of use all of their normal meetings, normal working norms for this. But that would definitely be something to consider, and because that would make it a little bit more hackathon-y too, right? Like if folks could make their own teams and organize work that way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And so I know we talked about this because I often mention this because I think it's very true, and we should talk about it, that agile software development looks very different when it comes to different organizations. Did this event change anything within your working culture? Do you have any sort of different structure in place since then? Or did you make any changes with regards to how you interact with other teams?
So again, I don't think anything quite like specific at this point, but we've had a lot more we've been talking a lot more recently about how do we talk more directly to our customers. How do we get teams more directly talking to our customers? We have also done in December, I think it was, we did a whole group of cross-functional folks went through the Silicon Valley product group training, and that is all about like being customer discovery and being customer obsessed. So we have made a lot of improvements or trying to make a lot of improvements in how we focus on the customer. So I think that's one of the this is one of the outcomes, or this is that the sprint was maybe like a step along our journey, because we're always trying to improve, always trying to do better for our customers.
Yeah, thank you so much. You got me really interested about your other core values. Do you care to share with our audience?
Just a couple to sort of pull out here. Thriving in complexity is one of them. And this is about sort of being able to solve problems in complex situations. Another one is inclusive leadership. Another one is action-oriented. So they're all, the idea behind these core leadership behaviors is they're kind of like how we do our jobs, how we meet our goals, how we work with our teams. And they've been built into our performance evaluation process. And I really like them because they're behavioral. They're focused on working well with each other and working well for our customers. So anyway, that's a little bit more.
I love that. Thank you. And with that said, if we can circle back to this inside sales position that you mentioned, these are all really great because if someone wants to do better on their performance evaluation, they will do these behaviors, and you can also get them on your boat if your boat is going in the direction of these behaviors, correct?
Right.
I love that. Thank you so much. We have talked about many aspects of organizing an event like this. And you have gave us fair warning about getting enough buy-in and making sure that people are all on the same page. Also told us that we can't communicate enough, and that it's very important to make it fun and exciting for the people who will be involved so that they can bring their best selves and make anything that they make for the customer or the end user, whatever kind of product you're building. You should have the customer obsession that you have talked about. Is there anything else that you would like to add or you would like our listeners to know?
Well, that was an amazing wrap up. Really, really, you have really distilled all of that out really, really well. Yeah, I mean, I think if there's one thing that I've learned from leadership generally is you cannot communicate enough. So that would be a good one to leave folks with. And then I'm just a big believer in having fun. If we're going to be at work for 8 hours a day and working with all these folks, we should look for ways to make it enjoyable. So this particular event was all of that.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for this conversation.
Thank you, Carolina.
Where can our listeners follow you or follow your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on Twitter. I'm at Minarets. I don't tweet a lot, but I do read a lot of tweets. And feel free to also connect with me on LinkedIn.
I love that. I am sure our listeners are intrigued. They might have some questions to follow up. Thank you so much for joining me today. Dearest listeners and dearest watchers, today my guest was Maura Kelly. She is the VP of Engineering at Mailchimp, and she shared about the details of this wonderful event. I hope that you all enjoyed our conversation. Give it a thumbs up, a like, follow, share, subscribe, all that jazz. And also follow Kelly on all of her social media platforms. I am Carolina Toth, and I hope to see you next time.
Thanks for staying with Level Up Engineering. If you enjoyed this podcast, so will your friends. Share this episode on your favorite social networking platform. To stay up to date with our content, follow Level Up Engineering on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Google Podcast. Brought to you by Coding Sans, a software development agency building web applications with Angular and Node.js. Check them out at codingsans.com.